So tonight is a special night as we come to celebrate this evening with a dear friend and colleague, Mr. Jim Carter, whose contribution to Alberta's workplaces is being acknowledged tonight. The Alberta Congress Board's Distinguished Workplace Leader of the Leader Award was established to recognize the work of individuals who have dedicated themselves to improving the Alberta workplaces through their vision and action for the benefit of communities, workers, other associated employers and stakeholders. This evening is for you, Jim, and we want to tell everyone here a bit more about you and what you've accomplished. Jim Carter was appointed President and Chief Operating Officer of Syncrude in October of 1997 and remained in that position until his retirement earlier this year. A mining industry veteran, Mr. Carter has contributed invaluable knowledge, experience, and dedication to the achievement of Syncrude's goals. Since joining Syncrude in the first full year of operation, he played a prominent role in a variety of initiatives aimed at enhancing safety, reliability, production, unit costs, and product quality. Mr. Carter's leadership has led to the introduction of technologies and processes at the mine face and within the plant that have led to both incremental and revolutionary advances in safety again, productivity, environmental performance. Leading by example, he has also spearheaded the implemented innovative learning initiatives and skills upgrading opportunities within the company. In the company, he has actively engaged oil sands stakeholders to assure opportunity is appropriately shared and that Syncrude's operation proceeds smoothly, responsibly, and efficiently. Mr. Carter began his career with Syncrude in 1979 as manager of overburden operations, where he managed the overburden removal fleet. In 1981, he was appointed Assistant General Manager of Mining. Mr. Carter was appointed General Manager of Maintenance and Operations Services in 1986 and was promoted to the following year to Vice President of Administration. And between 1989 and 1997, he served as Vice President of Operations. Prior to joining Syncrude, Mr. Carter held progressively responsible management positions with McIntyre Mines Limited and the Iron Ore Company of Canada. Mr. Carter holds a Bachelor of Engineering degree in mining engineering from the Technical University of Nova Scotia and is a graduate of the Advanced Management Program at Harvard Graduate School of Business Administration. He is the recipient of 2 honorary doctorate degrees from the University of Alberta and the Technical University of Nova Scotia. In 2005, he was named Resource Person of the Year by the Alberta Chamber of Resources, was inducted as a Fellow of the Canadian Academy of Engineering, and received an Alberta Centennial Medal from the province of Alberta. In 1999, Mr. Carter was presented with the Centennial Award, the highest honor bestowed by the Association of Professional Engineers, Geologists, and Geophysicists of Alberta. He is also a recipient of the Canadian Institute of Mining Past President Award and the CIM Fellowship Award. Mr. Carter is an active supporter and advocate of the Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy, and Petroleum, and was a founding member and chairman of the Rocky Mountain Branch. He is a frequent speaker at regional and national conferences. His other professional and community affiliates include Director and past Chairman of Mining Association of Canada, Director Alberta Research Council, Chair of the Audit Committee, Champion of Aboriginal Human Resource Development Council of Canada, Honorary Chairman of Edmonton Business Council for the Visual Arts, past Director of Alberta Chamber of Resources, Founding Chairman of the Industry Advisory Committee, University of Alberta School of Mining and Petroleum Engineering, member of the Association of Professional Engineers, Geologists, and Geophysicists of Alberta, co-chair of Vista Ridge Ski Hill Association, and past member of Board of Governors of Keano College. Mr. Carter now resides in Edmonton with his wife, Lorraine Bray. Together, they have 6 adult children. I'd like to just take a moment and add a personal note. I had the good fortune of working directly and indirectly for Jim over the last 12 years of my career at Syncrude and developed a great respect for his leadership. And I just wanted to mention 3 areas. The first was safety. Jim refused to accept mediocre performance from contractors or Syncrude staff. He personally felt responsible for everyone on our site, and anyone who thought he wasn't serious soon found out. Secondly, Jim placed great value on the relationship with employees. He had a sixth sense and could assess morale. He loved to drive out in the mine and sometimes asked me to go with him, and he talked to everybody and everybody knew him. And he was known and respected throughout the plant by most employees. The third area that I think Jim excelled in was handling any emergency situation. No matter what happened, Jim would remain calm and quickly develop plans and provide the leadership to get the operation back on track. So for many of us, we worked for Jim Carter. He was Syncrude. So before I call Jim up, let's take a few minutes and watch a short presentation. I think it's going to show up on the screens here in a second. I'd now ask Drew Mason, President of the Alberta Congress Board, and Jim Carter to please come forward to the podium.
Jim, in recognition of your valuable contribution to Alberta's workplaces, and also in recognition of your leadership in bringing together stakeholders to effect positive change for the benefit of all Alberta workers, it's my pleasure tonight to present you with the 2007 Distinguished Workplace Leadership Award.
First of all, Chairman Brian and ladies and gentlemen, and I should just make a comment here about Brian Bickley. Thank you for that very warm introduction and the video clip there. That's just excellent. Brian and I had our offices about 50 feet apart for the last probably 7 or 8 years. And Brian was, of course, our manager of industrial relations. And he and I used to catch each other at the coffee pot, and we'd always kind of keep up to speed with what was going on the labor front in Alberta. And of course that was very important to us because we had a huge complement of Alberta building trades folks working on our site, either doing major turnarounds or in the construction process. And that, I think, enabled us more than anything to help stay in tune with their needs and enjoy the tremendous relationship that we actually have built up over the years with the Alberta building trades. So I just want to excuse me, recognize Brian for that contribution to Syncrude over the years. And I want to thank you all for this award. It's really very humbling to receive it. The fact that it comes from such a respected organization as the Alberta Congress Board gives it a special meaning for me, and I appreciate your very kind and generous recognition. I also appreciate the opportunity to offer a few thoughts with you about the importance of leadership in Alberta's workplaces, the kind of leadership that increases the capacity of the employer and also the workers and communities that contribute to the success of these organizations. Because I really think that in the robust economy that we have in Alberta today, if we want to sustain it, our workplaces are going to have to expand their forces and build capacity in all its forms, whether it's related to human resources, the communities where we live, or the shared environment that we have. And I wasn't intending on saying anything tonight about royalties, but if there is time at the end for a couple of questions, if that works, I'd be more than happy to give you a comment or two, at least from my perspective. From my perspective, though, the key to our success lies in organizational leadership and the values that you instill in yourself and the employees who work for you. As a business leader for many years, I've had the opportunity to observe how many different workplaces are run, and I've learned that the best of them aren't governed by rules so much as they are by the values expressed by the people that lead them. And an outward-looking business that's in tune with the world around it is one that's going to create more value and have a greater competitive edge over the long run. In fact, I used to work for a company that I believe fits this description. Working with our employees and our community stakeholders, we developed Syncrude into a model of an environmentally responsible and socially progressive company, a company that has met with a lot of success in building capacity through our commitment to responsible development. We also turned out a pretty good profit for our owners over many years of developing the Athabasca oil sands. And as you heard from Brian, Syncrude is not a new player to this business. We've been in it for just about 30 years now. And all of this came out of our corporate values. I want to talk to you about this for a minute because corporate ethics policies and codes of conduct and the like really don't matter much if they aren't embodied in the actions of every single person who works for the company. And that puts the onus on leaders like me to make them real. Now, if you believe in the statements of principle that you helped your organization to write, then it's entirely logical that you should live up to them. And what's more, you've got to take the next step and continually work to engage all employees in these beliefs. I was a leader at Syncrude for many years, and I can tell you that this is a job that never goes away. So in keeping with our values, Syncrude has worked to build capacity both within our company and within our stakeholder communities across all the core areas of the sustainable development model. As one example, we work toward being an industry leader in the area of environmental health and safety, and as a result, we achieve safety performance that is the best in Alberta industry. We also achieve significant reductions in air emissions and water use. We reclaim nearly 1/4 of our Mildred Lake mine site. We help facilitate transparent, multi-party environmental monitoring and management initiatives in our region's communities, and we help to raise the bar for community health and safety. Beyond that, Syncrude continues to be a Canadian leader when it comes to our contributions to the economy through the provision of jobs, the development of new enabling technologies for our industry, and the payment of taxes and royalties, which cumulatively now, to the end of 2006, amounted to more than $7.5 billion. And during 2007, Syncrude's contribution in this regard will exceed $1 billion, so it'll be over $8.5 billion by the end of this year. As well, through our community investment efforts, we helped meet the social needs of our key communities, whether those needs were in health, education, recreation, or arts and culture. So these communities can be attractive places for the workforce we rely upon to live and raise their families. In a nutshell, that's the story of how one company succeeded, simply by expanding its outlook and its scope of influence beyond its own workplace. But let's dig a little deeper to see how we arrived at these outcomes, and let's start with safety. At Syncrude, safety is a fundamental value. But this was sometimes interpreted, and I'm going back a few years now, by some to mean safety first unless it gets in the way of production. And some employees actually thought they were doing the company a favor by taking safety risks to get the job done. And clearly this was not the way that we wanted to do it, and we had to take actions to demonstrate that we were serious about that. But you know, it's like anything else. When you provide the right kind of leadership, people realize what it is that you're trying to do, and before long, we had our employees on side, and indeed, I can say that over the years, the lines are blurred on our site at Syncrude between safety performance measuring for our own employees and, for example, the contractors. And now we've got the contractor community performing just as well on that safety front as Syncrude employees. So today, Syncrude has the best safety record in the oil sands and one of the best in Canada's industrial world. And that's a powerful way to attract and keep the people that you need to run your operation. In fact, I think somebody said earlier on this morning on one of the panels that people expect nothing less today. And so it's great to have seen the industry move there. But I can assure you that Syncrude along the way was very much on the leading edge of all of that. Beyond this, Syncrude has also worked to increase the capacity of our industry to deal with safety issues through the Oil Sands Safety Association, which Syncrude helped to develop. And the whole thrust there is to try and get a common set of standards and rules of engagement in the industry in the local market. And it has worked to increase the capacity of the oil sands industry to grow in a number of ways by raising the performance bar on the safety side and promoting enhanced local training resources and promoting improved worker mobility, because everybody eventually will be working to the same set of safety standards. It's the same thing when it comes to interacting with our community stakeholders. Syncrude's guiding principles say that we will do this with care, honesty, and respect. And those are three simple words, but they mean an awful lot when it comes to building relationships and to be building a rapport with employees and contractors. And over the years, in the past, I've come up against employees, even within our own organization, who would prefer not to consult with our stakeholders, or those who questioned our community investment program when we had to cut back on our budgets. They viewed it as an activity that doesn't add any value to the core operation of the business. Or they didn't in those very early days. In fact, the opposite is true, and I think most people are converted to that thinking now. By working to build community capacity, especially as it pertains, for example, to Aboriginal people, we have become regarded as a good neighbor and have contributed to the capacity of our region to develop, attract, and retain the workforce that we require to support our business now and over the long haul. At first, this involved establishing a relationship of trust and mutual respect, which itself, can take some time. After all, in the industry that we're in, with huge trucks and shovels, you can't just move into somebody's backyard and expect the local population, whatever their heritage, to lay down the welcome mat unless they understand why you're there and what you're going to do and how it will impact them. So with the dialogue came an opportunity for each of us to work towards some common goals, with Syncrude being the catalyst. Syncrude, for example, runs a huge operation, yet it operates in an area that's sparsely populated and remote from urban centres, a situation faced by many in Alberta's mining and energy sector. Yet oftentimes operations like these are neighbours of Aboriginal communities, so you have to figure out how to connect the dots. Well, in the region where Syncrude operates, two of the priorities for the local First Nations are education, including encouragement of their young people to stay in school, and employment. So we have worked together on such issues as education and training, with the result that young Aboriginal people are getting the support they need to become successful learners. And as they get older, they're developing the skills they need to find rewarding and productive careers. And those of you that were here for the breakfast presentation this morning by Chief Jim Boucher got a first-class example of how that's working. And he talked about his companies doing $80 million worth of business this year and reaching $100 million within the next couple of years. And I knew Jim back in 1986 when we established the first contract with them, and that was a $2 million contract. So you can just see how they've grown in the last 20 years. It's just nothing short of magnificent. Happily for Syncrude, the company has benefited through this capacity increase in the local labour market. It's getting a local source of talent that's as good as any. In fact, Syncrude now has over 400 Aboriginal people in its own workforce, about 10% of the workforce, and its contractors employ several hundred more, and that's in the neighbourhood of about 350 people. And the salaries of the Aboriginal people that work for Syncrude on average are about just a little over $80,000 a year before overtime and benefits. And the entire Wood Buffalo community is benefiting by having young Aboriginal people to emerge as teachers, nurses, engineers, and the like. And in fact, I've often said that this is a classic example here of how it can be done, and we have lots of visits from people across the whole country of Canada trying to learn what's happened in that region. Beyond this, Syncrude support for education across the Wood Buffalo region, such as at Fort McMurray's Keano College, where it has a long history of support for major capital projects and in learning programs of all kinds, not just for the oil sands. This has helped us to meet most of our recruiting needs from within the local area. And in fact, local people have comprised between 60 and 70% of all of the new hires at Syncrude over the last several years. In a similar vein, Syncrude has worked to develop the capacity and support the business owners in our region, and they have proven to be an excellent source of goods and services that oftentimes is more competitive than other sources. So much so that in 2006, fully 1/3 of all our purchase orders went to companies in the Wood Buffalo region. And that's nearly $700 million, and this money has a very positive trickle-down effect in terms of employment and economic development. It has also helped to develop the business capacity needed to support the world-scale industry that the oil sands has become. Now, in keeping with its interest in increasing Aboriginal capacity, Syncrude also does a lot of business with the region's Aboriginal firms, and in fact, over the last 15 years, Syncrude has done more than $1 billion worth of business with Aboriginal companies, and that now exceeds over $100 million per year. And I suspect if people kept statistics, which they don't necessarily, I'm not sure that there's very many companies in this country that can boast that level of business relationship with Aboriginal entrepreneurs. Many of these firms are owned by the First Nations, while others are privately held. But the fact that they are now venturing forth to capture additional business from other oil sand players and are meeting with success in markets even further afield speaks to the impact of what can be achieved when there is a desire to increase community capacity through responsible development. Now, I mention this because there continues to be debate about the difficulties faced by many Aboriginal communities in virtually every region of Canada. And while I don't want to be prescriptive, I do think that what Aboriginal communities in northeastern Alberta have achieved is remarkable, and it should be celebrated as a model for others. Canada has gained greatly from their productivity and their increased participation in our community and our economy. Now, given that Aboriginal people are one of the fastest growing segments of our nation's population, this is a welcome trend indeed. In fact, one of the major sources of future workforce and business capacity in Canada will be Aboriginal youth. And anything we can do to encourage their success will be a benefit to the entire country. My point is that companies must spend money to buy the goods and services they need to sustain their operations. If they choose to do this in a responsible way, with a focus on adding long-term value and sustainable capacity within their communities of interest, much good can be created. And we've always said at Syncrude that before we decide that we're going to go and pursue the foreign worker effort, we better make sure that we're tapping into that valuable human resource talent pool around us, which is the Aboriginal communities. And our business of doing that for over 30 years now is paying off very handsomely. For example, at Syncrude as well, non-energy procurement represents about half of its total expenditures. And last year, this amounted to more than $2 billion, and the bulk of it, about $1.8 billion, went to Alberta-based companies, creating employee benefits for a lot of people beyond Syncrude's immediate base of employees. That creates a lot of capacity for Alberta that would not be generated if we chose to spend our money offshore. So you get it both from hiring the people and also providing those opportunities. I'd like to now just talk a little bit about environmental capacity. It's been Syncrude's experience that responsible development can be helpful on this front too. And I know that the oil sands are often quoted and talked about when people want to talk about negative things around the environment. And that's not always so. In recent years, for example, Syncrude and others have helped to establish a new way for Aboriginal communities, for example, to assess, manage, and manage the benefit from the impacts of industrial development. And you heard the Chief talk this morning about the IRCs, the Industrial Relations Corporations, which are really people in the community that help the community to understand the challenges of industry and environmental impact assessments and so on. And they have professional staff right within the communities now that are funded by the industry to help that to happen. IRC staff, along with professionals from industry and government, serve on the various regional groups that have been established to monitor and manage environmental effects. And these groups include, for example, the Cumulative Environmental Management Association, which is developing management systems to monitor and reduce the long-term environmental impacts stemming from industrial development. The provincial government takes the impact or the input from that group and then implements it through its regulatory processes. And then there's the Wood Buffalo Environmental Association, which operates a 24-hour-a-day air quality monitoring system in Fort McMurray. It's the most sophisticated in North America. And they disseminate the information and on a real-time basis put it on the website so people know what quality of air there is there. Another group is the Regional Aquatics Monitoring Program, which monitors and publicly reports on the condition of surface waters. Industry also uses its data to provide a baseline for any trends and really helps to understand the aquatic issues that might be affected by oil sands development. And it's not just Aboriginal communities whose capacity is being built as a result of these inclusive environmental processes. In fact, over 30 organizations participate in and benefit from the experiences and lessons learned, experience and lessons that are now being transferred across the province and across the country. And oil sands developers in turn are learning from this diversity of inputs. So capacity development is also being aided by the work of the Regional Infrastructure Working Group, Regional Issues Working Group, which is comprised of oil sands developers, and it helps to facilitate the resolution of diverse issues ranging from highway infrastructure to housing to health services. And it does this by collecting and continually updating socio and economic data from developers so that it can provide accurate forecasts on what needs such as housing and employment are for the community. You should know also that there is a regional or a reclamation advisory committee, and this multi-party group explores all aspects of reclamation and post-reclamation land use objectives, and the goal here is to ensure that the capacity of reclaimed land meets the needs and the desires of the communities that depend on it in some way. Now, in the oil sands industry, this issue has become something of a sore point because there's a perception among some people that reclamation is occurring too slowly and without any guarantee of success. And that's why Syncrude chose to take on reclamation projects that inspire confidence in the whole process. In fact, one of the projects completed on my watch was really has generated a bonanza of positive media coverage through the years, and it's also fostered much goodwill among our neighbors. And this project began to take shape more than 15 years ago when Syncrude was interested in demonstrating that reclaimed land could be used as habitat for large animals. And while we were initially thinking domestic cattle ranching, a conversation that we had about our plans with leaders of the Fort McKay First Nation led us to focus on wood bison instead. Bison, of course, are animals of some cultural significance to the region and to the First Nations people, and they once roamed across northeastern Alberta in large herds until disease and overhunting practically wiped them out in the early part of the 20th century. And in fact, many of the buffalo herds that still exist today, such as the one in Wood Buffalo National Park, are still threatened by disease. So it was indeed a novel concept to try to reintroduce the species to the area and to do it on reclaimed land. We got our first herd in 1993 from the Elk Island National Park. And today, almost 15 years later, I can tell you that this herd has not only thrived, but it has grown exponentially, and it is consistently wins awards at livestock shows. Beyond that, management of the herd provides sustainable employment to a number of Fort McKay residents, and it gives all members of that community the opportunity to connect with their past and hold on to traditional values. Of course, the other takeaway is that the capacity of Syncrude's reclaimed land to support large animal habitat is now widely accepted. And so while the 700 hectares that's dedicated to this cause may comprise only 15% of the total reclamation that we've done of 4,600 hectares, it has provided a disproportionate amount of goodwill amongst very important stakeholder audiences. And it also suggests that Syncrude knows what it's doing when it comes to reclamation, and when combined with other reclamation research projects, it publicly identifies Syncrude as a company that is using good science as a foundation upon which to build reclaimed landscapes that have productive capacity and which will stand the test of time. Now, the capacity of the Athabasca River to support oil sands development is another concern, and we've heard that referenced at least twice so far in the last day and a half. In this area, too, Syncrude has led the search for solutions. In fact, while river capacity is definitely an important perspective, another compelling concern for oil sands operators is the financial and environmental cost of storing process-affected water for long periods of time. So, you know, what I'm really saying there is that there is no incentive for the industry to use more water than it absolutely needs. It costs money to store it. We have to build large ponds to hold it, and they cost money. And of course, we have a policy at Syncrude where we have zero discharge of process-affected water. And so what we want to do then is do as much recycling as we possibly can. Syncrude over the last 5 years has now reduced its water intake to slightly more than 2 barrels of water per barrel of oil. And you heard Mr. Manning last night talking about the industry consuming 3 to 6 barrels. Syncrude is at just slightly over 2 barrels. And that's a reduction of some 50% over the last 4 or 5 years. This kind of performance was enabled by our search for ways to treat process-affected water so that it can be used again and again. And in fact, if you looked at the system, it's actually recycled 18 times, and about 80% of our water now is recycled water. The other 20% is makeup water, and of the 20%, about 15% of that goes right into the hydrological cycle, so it ends up evaporating and coming back down as rain. So those measures are certainly going to help other developers as well going forward to reduce the impact on the environment. Similarly, the capacity of the regional airshed to support oil sand development has also been the topic of much discussion. Syncrude's response was to cut our sulfur dioxide emissions by capturing them at source, and in our most recent expansion, the $8.5 billion UE1 project, $1.5 billion of that 8.5 went to environmental things, and one of them was to take SO2 that normally would go up the main stack and introduce an ammonia stream to it and turn it into ammonium sulfate fertilizer. So Syncrude today produces about 120,000 tons a year of ammonium sulfate fertilizer that goes right into the agricultural market. So we took a waste stream and turned it into that. And that good news story will continue thanks to a variety of process improvements and a $770 million commitment to do scrubbing on the existing two Syncrude, the first two Syncrude cokers. And when that comes into play in 2011, the SO2 emissions will be down to about 100 tons a day. That will be 60% less than 2005 levels, even though crude oil production is increasing by about 45%. So wrapping up, I hope that these few examples demonstrate the merit of the capacity development work that Syncrude has pursued during my year as a company leader. Work like this is fostering the growth of the oil sands industry and at the same time improving relationships with stakeholders who grant the industry its social license to operate. These efforts recognize the fact that workplaces can't operate in a vacuum because this approach is ultimately not sustainable. So while it's up to every workplace leader to determine how to express and integrate values with organizational strategy, I will be a very happy man when more of them understand that their capacity to succeed is inextricably tied to the community's capacity to succeed and the environment's capacity to be healthy. building capacity plays an essential role in enhancing public trust and in developing talented people in robust supply chains, in fostering the healthy environment upon which we all depend, and in reducing investor perceptions of risk. These things make for a very attractive business case at the end of the day, too. During my 28 years at Syncrude, we really tried to live our vision and values, and that stood us very well, because we opened up more avenues of opportunity for our employees and for our contractors and for our community and our shared environment, and therefore for ourselves. If we can do it, anybody else can too. But as I said, it starts with the tone and the values established by workplace leaders. And maybe that's something that you can influence for the better in your daily efforts as well. With that, I thank you for listening tonight, and of course for this very special award, and it really is, believe me, very meaningful to me, and particularly given that it's the first one to be awarded, which makes it even more special. It's been great to spend the evening with you, and I hope that the dialogue will continue over the course of the weekend, and thanks very much. And I think if we have a moment for questions, I know that I see Brian nodding his head, and I know that you were all hoping to be out of here by 8, so if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them on this or any other topic that you might have. Thank you. I guess I'm experiencing the dangerous position of standing between you and the bar, so it sounds like there's one there. Sure. Okay. Gee, I thought you'd never ask that. Let me just say a couple of things, because I think some of this gets lost in the translation of what's happening with big oil and all of those things. And I know there's a myriad of different influences on how people think about these things, but one of the things that I would point out, and I think it's very important for us to remember, is that the oil sands, the oil that we derive out of the oil sands is very expensive oil to produce. And if you looked at the 106 top major oil producing regions in the world, the cost of producing out of the oil sands ranks 91st out of that 106. So we're in the fourth quartile in terms of cost of production. And I think we need to remember that. And what drives that home for me is the fact that we have to mine 4 tons of material to make a barrel of oil out of the oil sands. And every time we mine a ton of material, we've got somebody driving a truck, running a shovel, pulling wrenches on equipment, generating an awful lot of employment associated with that. And so we have to be careful when it comes to comparing what happens in different jurisdictions around royalties to remember that we're creating a lot of wealth through job creation doing this. And I can tell you, the first 15 years of the 28 years that I worked at Syncrude, we toiled away in obscurity trying to get this industry attractive for investment and trying to make it successful. And I can tell you that, you couldn't actually get anybody in. I'm not going to say Edmonton because that would be unfair, but there wasn't that many people in Edmonton that really understood it. Nobody in Calgary understood it, and they sure as hell didn't understand it in Toronto. And then finally we got it to the point where it was coming along, and then it became attractive, and now it's sexy and everybody wants a part of it. But the formula is very fragile, and we have to be really careful to remember that it is a high-cost way of making oil. And we can still have it as a very viable resource for a long time to come, but we've got to be careful that we don't break the straw that, or produce the straw that breaks the camel's back. One thing about it is our initial expansion at Syncrude in 1997, it cost us $33,000 per barrel of daily throughput. The last one that we completed, UE1, cost us $85,000 per barrel of daily throughput. And that's just on capital cost alone for the expansion. Today, everybody's planning $100,000, and at the end of the day, it'll probably even be more than that, probably. And over that same period of time, over that last 10-year period, the operating costs have doubled. And, the Canadian dollar's at par today. 10 years ago, it was 75 cents. And so when you see $90 crude oil out there today, that's really worth, it's more like, $65 relative to the 75 cents. So we've got to remember all those components. What do I think about what happened yesterday? Let me put it this way, and some of you that are in the audience won't be happy with this, but I'm glad that it wasn't the full report. And I know that some people have advocated adopting the full report and making it non-negotiable. I think that would have been a lot more disastrous to the Alberta economy than what happened yesterday. And we'll have to wait and see. Everybody's rerunning their numbers, and they're trying to see, well, what is this going to do, to projects. I think there's no doubt that some of them will, that are marginal, will maybe fall off the table. And hopefully it's not many. So, it's not as bad as it could have been, and I think there's an opportunity to share more in the form of royalties than we've perhaps seen, but we have to be very careful that we don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. We could be back to scaring capital away and taking 10 more years to get it back again. So I'll say that much on that part. The one part that bothers me is negotiating signed contracts, and the government is talking about doing that with both Syncrude and Suncor. And, I don't quite know how they're going to do that, to be honest with you, because those are signed agreements that are in place. And, Alberta's been historically known as a place where a deal's a deal. So, I just hope going forward that a deal's still going to be a deal and maybe not a deal anymore. And we have to be careful what signal that sends to the marketplace as well. So, thank you for the question. A long-winded answer, but opportunity nevertheless. Thank you.
Good evening, Jim. I've got a question, but it's not a supplemental question on the royalties. In our discussion group this afternoon, we had some interesting discussion on corporate stewardship.
Right.
And to me, you've answered the question, but could I get you just to speak for a few minutes on the corporate stewardship of Syncrude?
Now, are you talking about financial stewardship or just total stewardship?
Just total stewardship.
Okay. Well, not unlike other companies, in the last few years, we've kind of moved away from the glossy financials only kind of thing. And for several years now, Syncrude has been producing a sustainability report, which actually talks to things like our safety record, our environmental performance, and it lays out in there, and it's based, by the way, on the Towards Sustainable Mining model that the Mining Association of Canada adopted actually when I was chairing that a few years ago. And it really kind of lays out the targets that we have for ourselves and how we're doing against those. We also have in there the financials. You have to recognize that Syncrude isn't itself totally publicly traded. Some of its owners are. For example, Canadian Oil Sands is, and it's a bit of a proxy for how Syncrude is doing. So that information is included in there. It talks about revenue generation, job creation, royalty payments, taxes, etc. The other component that we also produce is an Aboriginal report, and that's very unique to Syncrude. And we started doing that about 12, 14 years ago now, and it describes the commitments that we've made to the Aboriginal community and what we've done in that regard, and demonstrates our continuous improvement in that area as well. So. No, and by the way, those reports are all available.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim, for your insightful comments. And again, on behalf of all of us, congratulations. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for 2 more minutes. I have a few announcements to make and before we break for the evening. First, a friendly reminder that tomorrow morning breakfast, we will be hearing from Deputy Minister Ulysses Curry, which will immediately be followed by a panel session with, I think it's Ellis Allen from GE Canada and also Marlo Reynolds from Pembina Institute. The breakfast session goes from 8:30 till 10, so this way people can get a little bit of a chance to sleep in a bit longer than they did this morning. We also remind you to start filling out your evaluation form in your package in the program booklet. These are especially important. It's especially important to us that you take the time to do this because we rely heavily on your feedback to deliver the best conference possible. So please fill those out and turn them into the conference registration desk just by the entrance there. I do have 2 awards that are courtesy of the Edmonton Journal. And maybe, Debbie, could you come up and draw them for me? So these were these. These were the tickets you were given when you came in. So I'm going to read the number off here. The first one is 8502285. Maybe it's mine. Oh, we have a winner. No. No? Oh, good. And the second one is 8502388. Just a reminder, you're also invited to join us this evening for an evening's reception that will go until about 10:30 at Tent City, which is just downstairs towards the far end of the building. The mixer is generously hosted by Alberta International Intergovernmental and Aboriginal Relations. So let's give a big round of applause for their support. And also, if by chance you play a musical instrument like a guitar, please bring it along and join in for a nightcap and maybe a few songs. So this closes our session, and please enjoy the balance of your evening.